Okay, so let's talk about design thoughts. I don't think I put it in here. I've seen some people try to, including Wayne Barlow, suggest like some sort of organic jet. Obviously, this is a fun hypothetical thing I just put in here as a leading slide. I will say that there's no way I can come up with, and I've spent some time trying to do it, to come up with an organic jet, so don't do that. Also, don't do spinning propellers. You're going to really have to do flapping for powered flyers that aren't robots. Okay. Dragon can't fly. These dragons. Anyone see the problems here? Thank you. Yeah, I'll let it breathe fire. I'm not going to worry about that right now. That's one of those things that either is in the script or it isn't. But long body, very good, and holes. Long flexible body. It also has a long flexible tail, which were used sometimes in the turning, and then it has holes in the wings. These are basically going to ground your dragon for good. Now, to be fair to them, they did some really good things. The hind legs are relatively small. That's kind of a nice thing. Since they're flying, it reduces the weight. And when they're on the ground, as I mentioned earlier, they actually did a pretty cool job of getting around like more like a vampire bat on the ground does. One thing I'm trying to recall now, I think when they took off, they actually flapped the wings a lot and got up on the hind legs and just kind of like stood and flapped hard until they could fly. That would be a really unfortunate way for this animal to try to fly. Not that it could succeed anyways. So, of course, it was really cool, and of course you are going to have directors who are like, it has to have a long tail because dragons have long tails, or it has to have holes in the wings because that will look awesome. If that happens, so be it. But if you're designing your own, you really don't want to do it. In terms of hovering, the bigger you get, pretty much the harder it's going to be. So if you wanted to hover, what you really need to do is make it closer to hummingbird size. That said, you could still get this effect by having them basically air brake. If they're coming down and they go flap once or twice, they could like essentially achieve close to stasis for a small period of time and then like dive again. So you could still get this effect without having to truly make it hover indefinitely the way a hummingbird can. Okay, liftoff arc chart. Oh, that's a good question. How can you make them take off vertically? Vertical takeoffs pretty much are impossible actually for powered flyers. Birds can come the closest in that their hind legs have a little easier time leaping up, but really what it comes down to is the steeper your takeoff, Roman, the more your wings have to do the work. And birds have that bigger pectoralis fraction and can take off at a steeper climb. Pretty much pterosaurs and bats are going to be stuck with more horizontal flight profiles all the time. Okay. Here, of course, we have a dragon that has a classic bird giant pectoral muscle area. This doesn't have to be wrong, but it really is not necessary. Of course, they also shoved one scapula like right over another pectoral girdle, which I would not personally really recommend, although we did see a pretty cool one with the griffin where it kind of interlocked with the other one, and that was kind of neat. Bat wings, obviously. Here they've gone with all four wings there. And it's okay, but not necessary. Long tails. Now, all these long tails. I realize that dragons often have long tails, but really, probably not a good flight design. Here we get, of course, a more dinosaur hind legs, still long tail. In this case, the long tail makes a bit more sense because it's powering these dinosaur hind legs. I kind of like this. It's kind of bird-like in the way it curves over the top, has a wishbone and has a breastbone, but it doesn't have the hypertrophied, like, dramatic bird pectoral series. This is a pretty good compromise. Of course, you could drop these all together. In a critter like this, where it has really good sets of fore and hind limbs, you might almost say maybe this guy really could run and try to fly that way. But in reality, I mean, that's what you'd have to do if you made a design like this. In reality, this would be a heck of a lot of weight that wouldn't go into your flying power and would just make it that much less likely that the animal could fly in real life. Yeah, similar issues here. I think I'll let you guys use your imagination on the problems here. Well, here's actually a wyvern here from Harry Potter. This was pretty cool. This moved much more like you would expect a big bat or pterosaur to move while it was in the Harry Potter series. I liked this very much. Takeoff should have been off the forelimbs. That would have been even freaking cooler. And it did have a big spiky tail club here. I do like that this tail seems to have a purpose. It was a weapon here. And to go back to the question about the scorpion-like barb on the end of one, I would say to try to minimize the tail thickness and only make it long enough to hit whatever you think it's going to hit. And otherwise, you know, go ahead and make the barb nice and large and scary looking at the end, especially because barbs are kind of compressed side to side, so there's no reason they can't, you know, be pretty good size there to make it look scary. It might be, if you're really using a barb and a flying animal, rather than having it whip over the back to get things, which could be awfully difficult to make work without making the tail huge. And since the animal is going to fly, presumably, one thing you might want to consider is basically turning the scorpion tail upside down so it curls down towards the stomach and making it a way it catches prey. It swoops down, lands on prey, and then goes underneath it to inject it or whatever, to paralyze it. That would be a more functional scorpion-tailed wyvern, in my opinion. And it wouldn't have to be as long for it to work that way either. In that case, rather than going with the bat wings, you might want to consider going with a pterosaur wing and having the extra fingers here that could be better developed so when it lands, these fingers could latch onto the prey. Maybe the puny little hind legs could also latch on a little bit while the stinger is going and immobilizing the prey, killing it, whatever it does. That'd be kind of a fun design, actually. Someone should do that. Okay, these are just more examples. One thing I do want to say, you see a whole lot of horns on dragons. I know there have to be horns on dragons. It's just part of the shtick. I get that. What you might want to do, if you can design it yourself, is go more for spikes along the midline. Or if you have to do with these, make them kind of stick, yeah, like this. Have them kind of stick more straight back rather than the great out to the side ones. You know, if you have to, if design character is design character, if it's just what's required. But if you're trying to make a more functional flying creature and you have to put horns on it, minimizing how much it sticks out to the side would be a pretty darn good way to make them less objectionable. Here's a interesting wyvern I found in DeviantArt. I think it speaks for itself. It's not bad. It has very bird-like legs, so presumably it's leaping off on the hind legs and taking off bird-like. Wyverns are far better for this. If you really want to have something take off on the hind legs, you could do it that way. But then again, you know, these are still the biggest muscles, so making these limbs a little scrawnier and making these limbs the ones that actually takes off on would still probably be a more plausible solution ultimately. Here again, looks like they constructed this idea it's going to leap off and fly, but again, while that's okay, a more plausible scenario would be have the wings attached way back here, have these be scrawnier hind legs, and have these wings be bigger, which they'd have to be anyways for this animal to fly, and have it take off pterosaur-like, vaulting off the forelimbs. Could also make the tail smaller then. I do like this, not the holes, obviously. I do like how well the wing attached to the body here. Although I would say attaching them to like the legs could also be very cool. It A, forces you to, if you're going to animate it, constrict how it walks on the ground to get that bat and pterosaur feel. Probably more plausible. And B, it will give, again, if it's going to be animated, a heck of a lot of fun for things landing, coming in to land with the littler legs first, kind of air braking with the wing coming down like this to catch the wind. That's not what I was looking at. It's too low res. No. Oh, I did want to mention this. This, of course, is Dragonheart. Antler-type horns that stick out to the side of Roman are probably not good on flyers. Antler-type horns, though, that kind of grew mostly back, so they could branch a lot still, and maybe even slightly go side to side, but not too much, so they'd be more obvious from the side, would be totally fine. And maybe the animal could turn its head or kind of strut around with the side-facing potential mates and or challengers or whatever. So you could do that. You just wouldn't necessarily want to be like, boom, boom. That's less likely. One thing that was funny here, so when it flew, and it wasn't actually flying here, this is a bad example. When this animal flew in the movie, they made the wings as big as they could possibly make them in order to make it look like it could plausibly fly despite being like rhino-sized. But when they were that big, they actually could not fold up on the body. So they had to come up with two separate wing models. One when it was folded up to kind of fit on the body and make it like not just a head and legs with wings. And then they actually morphed when it flew to the bigger ones that were far bigger than the animal that wasn't flying. This is a real problem. The bigger you make your animals, the more that problem will happen because you really need to have big, big wings to make big animals fly. And here, of course, once again, we have Rain of Fire. And why I'm showing you this was the best part of the movie. They did a fantastic job of them on the ground with that very vampire bat-like motion driven by the forelimbs predominantly. That was fantastic. People should all strive to do that. And that honestly is all I have on those. I did want to say fun things you can do. Lots of animals that fly seem to get into eating fruit and get big brains. So if you're coming up with an intelligent species and want it to look totally crazy, much like Nemo Ramjet's intelligent pterosauroid here, consider making secondarily flightless animals that are intelligent. That could be a lot of fun. There's Longisquama again.